Okay, Brad, I took the kiddo on a pilgrimage this week.
Whoa, to?
Some might even say it was well, I don't want to say jihad because that's a loaded term that's problematic for a lot of reasons. But we went down. I took her to see a movie on film.
Film? Wow.
Film in a theater.
That is a religious experience.
I know. Well, I realized as we were going, like we went to see Dune at one of 30 IMAXs participating in 70 millimeter film projection around the world. The Metreon AMC in San Francisco, California.
Formerly North America's biggest IMAX.
What? Who's bigger now?
I don't know. I'm pretty sure somebody took the crown. They used to trumpet that. They used to really let you know and remind you frequently this is the biggest IMAX on the continent, and I don't think they say that anymore. So. Well,
so they had to. So they're projecting Dune on film, the Metreon in San Francisco at the IMAX. And it's using the same huge platter that they had to do for Oppenheimer because the movie's like 2 hours and 30 or 40 minutes long.
Yeah, the 6 mile long film reel.
Yeah. And also, I realized usually when we used to go to that theater, because like I used to be a Stubbs, one of the tested perks was that I had a Stubbs membership. So I got 3 free movies a month or whatever. And we would go, I would take the kiddo down and we would go to the Dolby Cinema display down there, which is, I think, probably consistently the best digital projection I've seen, partly because they have standards and stuff for those Dolby Cinema theaters, but partly because it's also the one that's like 4 blocks from the Dolby executives. So when they want to demo the theater, the in theater experience to people, they take them to that one. So it was always really good. So she'd never been to the IMAX before.
Wow.
Was the takeaway.
And also never to a film projection.
And I think so. We went to a couple of things at the Castro when she was little. Like we went, like Castro does like sing along Disney and sing along Sound of Music. So like we went to see The Little Mermaid in a sing along format, and I think we saw Totoro there once. I think that those are probably digital projections at this point. I don't think we took her. I think if they do a film projection there, they make a big deal out of it.
Yes, yeah. San Francisco has a ton of those little indie type. I started to say second run theaters, but I think second run implies that the movie is still coming off its first run, and this is more like 40th run, movies from the 80s and stuff. But looking at the websites for a lot of those, you definitely get the sense that like 90% of these showings are like a Blu-ray projected onto a screen, because like 1 out of 12 or something will be like, hey, we got a film reel.
Well, and the Castro was set up to do like real the modern, the hard drive projections and all that, but they also definitely were part of the, hey, we have some reels, we're passing them around circuit, right? So anyway, the upshot is she'd never been in the IMAX before, and when she turned the corner, so if the San Francisco IMAX, when you go, it's a 15-story tall or 8-story tall high screen or something ridiculous. And when you walk down this long hallway to get to it, and then you turn the corner and you're just at the foot of the screen, basically. And it's like, it feels like you're standing up against the side of a building, basically.
It is cavernous in there for sure.
Yeah, it's a substantial room. We went up and we got to our seats, and she was like, this is a really big screen, Dad. And I was like, oh, you have no idea. And it's like, it's a weird aspect ratio too, because it's not really letterbox at all.
No, it's very tall.
Pretty portraity. It's almost TikTok-y at this point. Mm-hmm. So it's film designed for Gen Z is what I'm saying.
IMAX is the TikTok of film projection.
Yeah, exactly. That's what Christopher Nolan's always been about, right? Welcome to Brad and Will Made a Tech Pod. I'm Will.
I'm Brad. Hello.
Hello. Hi. Hello. I see the duck behind you.
The duck. I am in Duckland again.
When you say duck like that, I feel like I should hit the ground. Brad, we picked up a new car last week because our Bolt is almost out of the lease is almost up. We did a 3-year, and we'll do an episode about it, I'm sure, at some point in the future when I spend a little more time with it. But it's a real there's a lot of computer stuff in the car.
Ooh, significant upgrade, I'm sure.
Significant upgrade. Yeah, this car feels like I'm driving the future. Like I can press a button and it'll more or less stay in the lane that it's on the road, and like not smash into cars in front of it and keep speed up. And like it's a little nuts. I don't know how I feel about that stuff yet. I still am skeptical of the self-driving features.
Interesting. I'm excited to hear that. I am having to do some driving on this trip, it turns out of necessities, which I've tried to avoid as much as possible for the last 3 years.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever known you as a driver.
I mean, I drove plenty before I moved to California.
Yeah,
21 years ago, and then ceased driving. So I drove just fine, and then didn't drive for over 2 decades. And you know what? It comes back pretty fast.
Well, that's good.
But I should say I'm not even used to key fobs. That's what they're called, right?
The little beeper thing.
Like the thing my parents have a Subaru, it's an Outback 2018, I think.
Yeah, is it all one, like it's just one like round plastic thing that's the whole key?
Like I've never even driven a car that had like a fob where you had to hit buttons to do things on it. But this one is like beyond even that, where you just need it on your person and then you just do the stuff to the car without even touching the fob. Like that is future technology to me. So whatever you've got going on is going to be like from 50 years.
Yeah. When you're back in town, I'll come by and we can go on a ride sometime. But I just walk up to the car and the door unlocks and like the handles pop out and it's like, hey, you want me to open you?
So do you even have to touch anything?
You can if you want, but if the fob is in my back pocket, sometimes the water in my meat body is enough to block the radio and make it think I'm farther away than I am. But if it's in my jacket pocket, then it just opens the door. I still have to pull the handle.
You know what that means? You just, every time you approach the car, you just need to turn around and moon it.
Ass first. Yeah. I was down at IGG doing some stuff for PC World the other day, and I saw my first Cybertruck in real life.
Oh, I saw it. Same here. Like Monday, the day I flew out on the way to the airport, I saw one
in San Francisco or in North Carolina.
Yeah,
okay.
In San Francisco.
It's an ugly car.
It sure is.
Yeah, I just wanted to walk up and put handprints all over it just to be an asshole. If I'm being honest.
No offense to anybody who owns one, but
yeah. I don't, that's Brad's policy, not mine.
You know what? Actually, maybe we're comfortable not playing to the Cybertruck owning audience.
Yeah. This might not be the podcast for you. Yeah. So I was shocked at the ugliness and the kind of poor fit of all the body panels when I walked by it on the way to lunch and was anyway. Oh, well, whoops.
Strange times on the highway.
Look, Kishore used to call him real life Tony Stark, and it turns out he's real life Justin Hammer, probably instead.
Yeah.
Brad, we're doing something a little different this week. Real life has been a lot lately for both of us.
Yes. I'm out here on the East Coast again. I've got some family obligations while I'm here that are proving to be much more time consuming than I expected. So, we talked last week about some episodes we have in the hopper, and those are not exiting the hopper, we should say.
No, we had talked about doing a thing about the Linux hack, the
XZ/liblzma backdoor, which is kind of like the biggest story in software development in a minute.
It's right up there with Heartbleed and some of the other big.
It's so crazy, man.
Yeah.
There's like so much like intrigue. There's like such a clandestine nature to it with the social engineering it took to pull it off, and like people trying to sleuth out which nation state this hacker or cracker or whatever term you want to use is associated with. Like there's a lot going on there.
The next step is honestly we're going to have a federal security agency that helps open source people with their with this kind of penetration attack. Cause I think anyway, we'll either we'll do a potpourri episode that includes this, or we'll do it in its own episode next week or the week after, sometime in the not too distant future. It's an interesting story. It's still developing. So I'm kind of okay letting it sit because I think it's one of those things that like any day now we're going to keep knowing more, which is good.
An extra week. God, what's it? It's been at the time of this recording, it's been about a week and it's like 8 days, I think. Like 8 days, I think, since I think it was last Friday.
Thursday. Yeah.
Thursday, Friday. So yeah, like an extra week. People are definitely going to keep uncovering more stuff. Like the author of XC, the creator / maintainer, was on vacation when all this went down, and he said he's going to be digging into it as of like right now. So maybe he'll have more to say by then. CISA, are you familiar with it?
The Central Intelligence Security Agency,
the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, on our long list of alphabet agencies. Apparently, that's the one that put out an alert like within minutes of this disclosure happening. Like, I guess that's the federal body that would most closely regulate. Anyway, we'll save that for the episode.
The open source cops. But so anyway, this week last episode we had a ton of extra questions left over on the March Q&A. We actually also had been kind of mining back into the past history, and there's some questions that we answered before that maybe are going to be interesting enough to answer again and see if the answers have changed. Mm-hmm. There's also a bunch of good kind of evergreen questions in there that are just, worth revisiting from as far back as like late 2023. So yeah, we're going to go down and do a questions through the ages this week, and then we'll hopefully be back on the regular schedule by next week.
A supplemental Q&A. These questions are roughly mostly from the last 6 months of Qs, but I bet we could go all the way back to the beginning sometime.
Yeah, I pulled to. Like there was one back in early 2020 in January of 2020 that was like, hey, is there anything that would that you can imagine completely changing the way you live your life over like say staying inside the house for 6 or 8 months at a time, stuff like that. And I was like, oh, that's a stupid question. We're never going to answer that one.
What did they know?
Yeah, how did they know? What's our first question, Brad? What do you got?
To investigate that. All right. Here is the first question from Discord, from Visualizer, from December 25th of last year, as a matter of fact. Do y'all think there will ever be a reckoning over the steady and shitification of our tech and services? Or will people just accept things like Amazon and Google getting shittier and shittier to use?
So if you don't know, the enshittification is a idea that was put forward by Cory Doctorow, science fiction author, Boing Boing co-host from the old days. And like he's one of the people who started the anti-DRM crusade in the early 2000s. So generally speaking, smart guy worth listening to. The idea of enshittification is that instead of once a service reaches a critical mass of users, you can the people, there's no incentive for keeping it good, right? Yeah. That it just keeps getting you keep degrading the user experience in order to make a little bit more money and a little bit more money, or squeeze a little more value out of your users, or whatever the service is. But the end result for people who use it every day and rely on it is that it's worse and worse every day.
Yeah, I credit to him. I don't think I have ever seen a newly coined term catch on this fast and become this widely used, and
I mean, people like it's like a thing that people, it's like when you ask people if they saw that Genie movie with Shaq in it in the 90s, and they all say, oh yeah, man, that was a great movie. Mm-hmm. This is a universal experience. Everybody's had this happen, right?
I guess that's what it is actually, is that people have been feeling this for a while now. And as soon as somebody put a good pithy term to it, like they needed to give voice to their angst over this stuff. And yeah, like what would trigger a reckoning in this situation? Like, it's like they all have a sort of collective monopoly on this style of service, and they all seem to be kind of going in the same direction, some much more than others. But I mean, like what alternative is there but to keep putting up with it? I would like there to be one. I don't know.
So in the past, when this has happened before. It happened with IBM in the 90s. It happened with Microsoft in the 2000s, 2010s. Those IBM went away for all intents and purposes for normal users. Yeah. Microsoft is still out making new versions of Windows that are each a little shittier than the one that came before.
Yeah. Surfaces, all kinds of consumer facing stuff.
Yeah. So I don't know. Like I want to say it's somebody comes out and makes a better experience, but at this point, Google and Amazon are so huge that I don't think it's going to matter. And you look at things like, Disney Plus doing 9 years or whatever of essentially, introductory pricing, and then like all the streaming services jacking up their prices in the last year as they're reducing the amount of content that they put out, new shows they put out on the services and stuff like that. And I don't know that there's a good answer other than to stop giving these places money. Like you don't have to buy stuff from Amazon if you don't want to.
That's true. Maybe that's actually the answer. Maybe the market will just correct itself at some point. I mean, like if you use one of those giant email services, you could switch to something. We talked about that last week. Like you could switch to Proton Mail or Fast Mail in the email context, in the context of streaming. Pretty sure a lot of people are going back to piracy, So like at some point, maybe the revenue takes enough of a hit that they realize they have pushed it too far. I don't know.
Yeah. And like you can, just not giving them money, it turns out, it helps. Maybe not on one person's scale, but eventually they'll get to a point where they'll, like IBM, they'll look up and all of their customers have eroded, and they start looking and seeing what they should do. But I mean, Google's even theoretically looking at what they can do to improve search results. I stopped using search. I stopped using Chrome years ago, right? Don't use Chrome. Use Firefox. It's fully functional. I haven't hit a website that doesn't work in Firefox in years at this point. It may be a tiny bit slower.
Maybe I should give it a shot again. My understanding is, I haven't looked at numbers in a while. I think Chrome has a near monopoly on browser use at this point.
Bigger than Jesus. Yeah, it's enormous. Safari and Edge have tiny slices, and Edge is more shitified than anything else anybody else is using at this point. It went from usable to terrible faster than any piece of software I've ever used.
Yes, I 1,000% agree. Like it was, I genuinely I actually switched to it briefly for a period of months. I used, because it's still Chromium under the hood, just like Chrome, and when it first came out, it was pretty stripped down, but not in a bad way. It was streamlined and fairly elegant. I was like, man, this is built right into the OS. It seems less bloated than Chrome, sure. And like, good God, man, like just that toolbar alone, that sidebar crammed with icons, and like, is it Copilot? Is that the name of their AI stuff that they've crammed in there? Like, it's just, man, what a mess.
Well, and so the thing I'll say about Firefox is I use Firefox on the iPad, on the phone, on the PC. I don't use a Mac anymore, but I would probably use it there if I did. And like having the same browser, not using Safari on the phone and the iOS devices, and using Chrome on the desktop, because Chrome iOS has always been kind of crappy. Like having stuff like Tab Sync and the history sync across the devices is really, really convenient. It means that I can, when I'm sitting in the living room and I want to find something that I was reading on my PC earlier that day, I just open up the history tab and it's right there. And like, it's little stuff like that makes a big difference in how you use the software. So I don't know. And if you don't want to use Firefox, you can always use Chromium. You can use, there's other Chromium engine browsers that are available. So, and then look at the stuff you pay $10 a month to too. Like if you're paying for Apple iCloud stuff, you're paying for Google Photos, if you're paying for Amazon Prime, if you're paying for all this, you're sending the wrong signal by continuing to pay for these services if you don't like the way things are going.
That's for sure. You've got me thinking about maybe switching off of Chrome now. Did you see this incognito mode kerfuffle?
Yeah,
flap.
They suck.
Recently, I didn't read too much past the headlines there, but the upshot, as I understand it, is that turned out that Google has been collecting a lot of data from people's use of incognito mode in Chrome.
They tell you incognito mode just doesn't save history. All it does is doesn't save your history.
So those warnings have always read to me as them trying to warn you, hey, your ISP can still see what you're doing, like what sites you're visiting, or your DNS, whoever runs the infrastructure you're accessing through this browser. It never read to me, though, as if to say, hey, we are still watching what you're doing in this.
Do you turn on data collection, third-party data collection for apps? So like if it says, hey, can you send, like if Chrome says, hey, can you send your data back to Google to help us improve the experience of this product? Do you say yes or no to that?
In the Chrome context, or just broadly?
Just in general.
Like in something like games, usually sometimes.
Game,
actually,
yes. Yeah.
I have drifted more toward just a blanket no policy on that. But I used to care way less about something in like a video game. Like a lot of games ask if they can collect metrics, and I do agree to a good number of those, especially if it's a game that I actually care about. But,
having been on the game side, the data used for that is generally just used to make the game better rather than to sell you stuff.
Yeah, and like what personal, I mean, what data are they going to harvest from my play style, or how long I stayed in game, or whatever, or what sensitive data? Like there's nothing to hide there, but like,
well, they'll use it to make a game that appeals more directly to you if you are representative of a large enough sample of player base, right? That's not a bad thing.
That's fine. But like OS and browser level stuff, like just about anything in the computing context, I feel a lot weirder about.
Always no. I'm always no. Yeah. Like the thing to always remember, and this is another Cory Doctorow thing, is if you know what zip code somebody is in and their relative age, you can do within about a 5% accuracy figure out exactly who they are by taking that information, like taking an IP address and an age and syncing that across public databases.
Cool.
So yeah, there's no that anonymized data collection is rarely anonymized.
Yes,
is the TLDR.
Man, we're going to spend this whole episode talking about this one question, but the rise of the security check Not exactly a CAPTCHA, but they'll do it for a lot of tax services and financial stuff that you sign up for these days, where it's like a list of questions that all draw from publicly available data about you.
Yep.
The ones that are like, which of these former addresses did you live at? And it'll be an apartment from 25 years ago. Or like, which of these cars did you drive? Who of these people are related to you? And it's your deceased grandfather from 30 years ago. Like that stuff. I don't like that. That stuff is skeezy as all get out.
Yep.
Not pleasant.
Not a fan.
The internet sucks now. Anyway, shall we move on?
Yeah. Question 1 answered.
There you go. Asked and answered. Captain Swayzak from the Discord in January. Hopefully this is still relevant to you. I'm thinking about taking a job transfer, which would require me to move from the Midwest to the Pacific Northwest. Is there any tech I should be looking at to simplify or help in the moving process?
Oh, man. I don't know. What do you do? I haven't moved in a long time at this point.
I have not either. And the last time I moved was just across town. So it's been like 21 years since I moved cross country. How about AirTags is the first thing I thought of.
So AirTags, I think, are useful. Although I don't know that they'll work inside like a moving van. So it's not like you'll be able to see where your truck is necessarily if they're not showing you. One of the things I do, I find most useful when I'm moving is to, and we do this, we just took a bunch of stuff to storage a few weeks ago and did the same thing there, is to put, when you're loading boxes, to pack, to take pictures of everything as they're going in and take like label the outside with a number or an identity, 1A or 1B, whatever, tied to the room that it came from. But then you take the picture of the label with the stuff in the box and then you know what's in the box, which it turns out is very helpful when you're trying to find the one thing that you need out of that box. Yeah,
that's way better than what I was going to suggest, which was some kind of like spreadsheet or database with contents of each box. But a photo is way easier.
Yeah, what I like, I wouldn't go so far as to like pack the box and then unpack the box and take a picture with everything all laid out, but just take pictures of the layers as they're going in. If it's like a deep box. My biggest thing when you're moving is just to use lots of small boxes instead of a relatively small number of big boxes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd love to hear how that goes. And if you found anything, that's an interesting question. I'd love to hear feedback from other people. It's one of the reasons I thought it was an interesting question.
Yeah, for sure. Let's see. Question from Lunchbox 700 from January. What feature of a piece of tech did you scoff at until you started using it and realized you were just a cranky old man yelling at clouds? A somewhat recent one for me was the AirPod Pro active noise canceling and transparency mode. I thought for sure I wouldn't care at all. I just needed new earbuds. I was so wrong.
Yeah, that's an absolute banger as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. I might be inching closer and closer to some of those. I might, like, next time they refresh them and there's a new version out there, I might spring for it. I've got these corded Bose noise canceling earbuds, which were great when I bought them 10 plus years ago. Still work fine, but I feel more and more embarrassed every time I get on a plane and pull out this like long gangly mess of cords with a little inline box attached to it. And I look at everybody with their very fancy earbuds and I might give up the plug.
So the thing I'll say is the battery, the way they manage the charging on those, like they do the slow charge above 80%. And sometimes it just like if it doesn't think based on your past usage that you need to go above 80%, it just won't charge above there. So your battery stays good longer.
Sure.
Which is my main argument against buying, battery wireless headphones. The ANC.
Sorry. To be clear, I do have some wireless. I have 2 nice sets of wireless earbuds for like exercise and going around town. I just don't have any with noise canceling. And I will say the other thing enticing me, I have a watch and a phone, and most of the like kind of multi-charger apparatus that you find are actually 3-in-1s.
Yeah.
Like you're rarely going to see a phone and watch charger. You're usually going to see a phone, watch, and AirPods charger.
Yeah.
And so I have like 2 of those now with this big lonely spot for AirPods I don't own. And I'm like,
But if I had AirPods, well, it's okay. So the ANC mode is nice. It's the same as any good noise canceling mode, right?
Sure.
The transparency thing is they've gotten really good in the time since you bought those headphones. So it doesn't sound. In the old days with a pass-through mode, it sounded like you were getting a tinny representation of the outside world. Now it's indistinguishable from me not having the AirPods in my ears, even my own voice, which is really weird.
So I had that thought on the flight out here as we departed very late and then got there and sat on the runway, and I missed my connection and had to spend the night in an unfamiliar area, not my destination.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But as the flight was progressing and the pilot kept coming on, giving us updates on like, hey, we're trying to get you there as fast as we can. With those Boses, with the noise canceling on, it's super pleasant. Like it totally drowns out or cancels out the sound of the engines and stuff, but I can barely hear anything over the intercom. And and that thing does have a pass through, but when I turn that on, it lets in both the pilot, the PA, and the sound of the engines. So I was wondering if like the filtering logic on the AirPod Pros had gotten to the point where like, is it completely transparent where you would hear the PA clearly and still no engines, or is it still a little fuzzier than that?
So they have a thing called adaptive transparency, I think, that tries to remove. I use it often when I'm cooking, right? Because there'll be people coming through the kitchen. They want to talk to me, but also I don't want to hear the fan on the hood and stuff like that. And it filters out some of the like fan noise and the engine noise and stuff like that when you're on the plane. It doesn't do the full thing, but it does better. It's like splits the gap, okay. Right?
That's fine. As long as it's intelligible, it doesn't have to be perfect.
For me, the real winner is the conversation mode, so that when I start talking and I have it on transparency on either the adaptive transparency or the noise canceling mode, it switches over and it turns on the outside microphone and it mutes my whatever I'm listening to, so I can have a conversation without me having to like put down what I was working on and go back. It's stuff like that is really good. I'm trying to think the answer on the kind of the Apple Pencil. I know I didn't mean for this to be all Apple answers here, but the Apple Pencil is really good, and turns out I use it a lot, mostly for sketching stuff, because often I'm taking the kind of stuff that I take notes for. I need to do a little quick sketch or a graph or something, and it's nice to have that. Sure. I also love the DualSense triggers. I thought I was prepared to be unimpressed with them. And the DualSense has become my primary PC gamepad now, especially for games that support it.
Interesting.
So it is. I think it's the business.
I thought that feature was great when the PS5 first came out. I've kind of chilled on it a bit. I still have it on, but I turned it down to the lowest setting on the PS5. Although part of that is because people figured out that was a huge portion of the battery drain, was having those things on full. Yeah.
Well, so I almost always have the gamepad plugged into the PC.
Sure.
But also turning it off the highest, like my fingers got tired playing the Spider-Man game with the triggers on.
Definitely. My answer here, I'm gonna moderate their language a little bit here, because they said, what piece of tech did you scoff at? I'm not going to say I scoffed at this. I understood the utility of it. I just didn't think I cared. HDR. I thought I was just fine without HDR. And in fact, actually thinking back a few years, when I got these new monitors, not new, they're 4 years old now, but when I got these the monitors I currently have HDR, but it's like shit HDR.
Yeah.
Even then, playing Destiny on those PC monitors with bad HDR was still kind of mind blowing. So you'd think I would have figured out that having an actually good HDR TV would have been cool, but I guess I just wasn't prepared for how much I thought it was incredible until I got it. I've been messing with HDR on the Mister.
Oh my!
Actually,
to do phosphor glow?
Not exactly. I wish that they were doing that, and maybe they'll get there. Although I don't think there's a lot of room left on that chip to do things at this point. In this case, all they're doing is, it's got all the scan line and like shadow mask overlays you can put on to kind of simulate the look of old CRTs, but you're overlaying things on the image, which necessarily is going to make it darker, right? So all they're doing is doing on the fly kind of auto HDR to bring
like tone mapping.
Kind of, just to bring the brightness of the image way back up to offset the darkening effect of that stuff. It looks quite good. Like, I've got it. What at the end of the day is an LCD TV. It's nothing super fancy, but it's passably believable as like old looking CRT. It's certainly not like a RetroTink 4K or anything, but with the HDR on and the setting it to like the Sony PVM or Trinitron preset or something like that, it looks totally passable as like a believable old video game.
That's cool.
Yeah,
that sounds good.
Yes.
Yeah, I found my enthusiasm for HDR was limited because I think the first real HDR set I saw was Norm's LG OLED 10 a while ago, and I'm going to tell you everything else looked kind of crappy in comparison. So
I believe that. Here's an email that came in from Jerry. Actually, I'll say real quick, my other answer to this question, and again, it's not that I didn't want these, I just never got around to it, was bigger monitors. Like that was another thing where I was like, these 20 inches are probably fine. They were not fine.
They were not fine, Brad. We told you they weren't fine.
And on that note,
yeah.
Jerry asks, I'm considering upgrading my monitors soon. My current setup is dual 24-inch 1080p monitors, which are old HP Z displays supplied by my employer. They're fine, but not particularly nice. I sit rather close to the monitors during the workday. I find this comfortable and it fits my ergonomic setup well and recline a bit when gaming or watching YouTube. I'd like to upgrade to 1440p monitors, assuming that the increased pixel density will be a nice upgrade. I'm debating between 24 or 27 inches. I'm a little worried that going to 27 inch will be a bit too much screen at a close distance, requiring more head movement than desired. While I do some gaming, 60 frames per second is fine for me, so refresh rates aren't a huge deal. Should I stick with the old 1080p monitors? Don't do that. Take it from me. Go with 24-inch 1440p monitors, 27-inch 1440p monitors, or something else I haven't considered.
Look, that Samsung G9's on sale now for like $1,100.
Is that?
That's the 35-inch ultra wide 35:1 ratio or something. It's
obscenely wide.
It's like a 120-degree arc around your head, basically.
Oh, Best Buy's got it for $799. Is what it says. 49-inch.
Yeah.
Do what you feel. I would never ever buy a monitor that wide or that curved.
Well,
personally.
So the thing about that monitor is you can set it up as two separate monitors in Windows.
Oh, wow.
So you get like left monitor, right monitor, but there's no seam between them.
Like Windows will see it as two discrete displays.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. I've wondered about that with ultra wide monitors. That's one of the reasons I still favor two regular 16:9 monitors side by side, is because you can very easily tell each monitor to do different things per the Windows display settings.
So every ultra wide monitor I've ever used has let you do that, for what it's worth.
As like two split monitors?
Two separate monitors. It shows up as two separate monitors in Windows. Sometimes they require a program to do it, but for the most part, it just, like my old LG one that just conked out, just works.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Like separate resolutions even?
No, you can't do separate resolutions.
Oh.
It's basically half of the horizontal resolution by the vertical resolution.
I see.
But yeah, so I wouldn't actually. I think the G9 is kind of expensive. It's ridiculous and fancy. I think the two 1440p monitors is a good choice. I don't.
What size though?
Well, so like I sit about arm's length away from my monitors. If I'm sitting straight up with my hands on the keyboard and mouse, I'm like, I can reach out and touch the screen, but just barely.
Yeah, I might even be a little farther than that.
I think you're a little further back. Yeah. I have a 24-inch and a 28-inch display on my desk. One is above the other. The 24-inch is low just because it's the high refresh rate display, and I use it for games.
28, huh?
Yeah, like I don't find the 28 to be bad. It's a 4K 28.
Oh,
I use the because it turns out sometimes it's handy to be able to capture 4K video when you work in games. I scale it pretty big. I scale it up to 150. So it's basically the text looks like it's about the same size on the 1080p display and the 4K display. But I think I guess my point is, with Windows scaling, with Windows ability to scale your desktop to whatever percentage you want, you can kind of get whatever size monitor you feel comfortable with. I don't find looking left and right to be a real problem at arm's length distance with the 28-inch monitor. If you're sitting closer than that, it might be. So I think that should be like that would be, I think that would be my recommendation, is figure out how far you're actually sitting away. And if it's closer than arm's length, then get the small one. If it's further away or arm's length or further, the 27s will be fine.
Sure. I've pretty much decided that 27-inch 1440p is a sweet spot for me. I think that's both a good size of monitor and a good pixel density.
Yeah.
I popped a calculator in. I can compare two screens. Give me just a moment. I can tell you your pixel density is going to be a bit higher, but not dramatically so, than 1080p at 24 inches. It is roughly 92 ppi versus 109.
Yeah.
So not a huge difference, but a little bit, which would mean like you would be more or less keeping the size of text and icons you're used to without scaling within reason, within like a margin of error, right? Like you're not going to, it's gonna feel roughly like the same size of screen elements you're looking at, just on a bigger screen.
Pretty much, yeah.
I did move mine back. Like I said, I've got them on arms, and they're at least, I bet they're pushing 3 feet away. Well, maybe not. I'm not in front of them. They're at home right now. I'm not there, but
your desk is pretty deep.
My desk is quite deep. It's like my desk might be from the era when CRTs were still common. But
yeah, I think so.
But I did need to move them back enough to feel like I could kind of see everything well at once. But I think that's a good sweet spot. I feel like 32 inch seems like probably the most common size for 4K screens. Would you say that's right? And
I think if you're going to do something that big, you probably want one monitor on your desk because it's going to be, or you have to go up and down because you're going to be looking too much left and right.
Yeah,
would be my suggestion.
And 4K at 32 inches is quite a bit higher PPI. That's like 137.
But then you do a 150 scaling and it comes back down to where you're expecting.
Yeah. And actually, there are plenty of bigger 4K screens out there. Like people are using LG OLEDs that are TVs that are 42 inch, I think, for a lot of those. Yeah,
I know a lot of people who use 42 inch TVs as monitors these days, especially if you're just primarily using gaming. If you're doing work, the benefit of having multiple monitors and being able to control windows with more kind of granularity is better. Did you read the part about the KVM switches?
No, that's at the end. I was saving that as a postscript. I will say the one option you presented here, the sticking with 24 inch screens, but going up to 1440p, I can't speak for you. That would drive me nuts because your brain is going to be seeing the same size screen you're used to, but everything's going to be much smaller. And
I don't think that would bother me.
I mean, you would get used to it, but I think I would much rather get both a size and resolution bump at the same time. Personally. Okay. Postscript. Are there any particular KVM switches you like? Is it worth upgrading from a basic one?
So I don't like KVM switches just because they add latency between your keyboard and mouse and your monitors to the PCs. So I generally switch inputs on the monitor and then use a software KVM to connect. I know sometimes you're in a work situation where that's not possible. So you can't install the software KVM software on your desktop, on your work PC, because it's maybe lower level than the security folks want you to install stuff. So I just get a USB switch. So it's what a KVM works is like an emulator where it takes input from your keyboard and mouse and then runs that through basically a small microcontroller that makes a fake keyboard and mouse that's connected to multiple PCs. At the same time, the switch disconnects and reconnects each one, just like you're unplugging and plugging USB devices. They're generally a little bit cheaper, and there's no latency because it's just a straight pass through. So, and then you switch the inputs on your monitor, either using the buttons or if your monitor supports it, you can use Control My Monitor.
Yeah, I've always found KVM to be one of the more amusing acronyms in computing because
I don't know what the V is. Video.
It's video, right?
Yeah.
Like, when you say it out loud, it doesn't make much sense. Keyboard, video, mouse, like
it should be VKM or KMV, right?
Yeah. Then you wouldn't confuse it with kernel virtual machine, which is the Linux virtualization layer.
Comes up all the time for me.
Yeah, right. It does for me. Okay.
IO Gear makes those USB switches, just FYI, and you probably USB 3 if you're using a RGB keyboard, because the USB 2 ones won't provide enough power.
Oh man, I should not bring this up. I don't know why. The last couple days before I left on this fairly lengthy trip, I started looking real closely at mechanical keyboards again.
I got Adam working on it. We're going to build one at PC World. You want to come over and have a keyboard building party sometime?
Like from scratch?
I mean, I don't know. I think probably do some soldering, put some switches on.
Okay.
Maybe not soldering switches, probably hot swappable switches, but yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that sounds fun. I mean, I was just looking at like $100 Keychron or something.
Yeah, that's a great place to start. Yeah.
Yeah.
You just so you know, you don't want soldered on switches anymore because you want to be able to change your switches, right?
Okay, I'll have to check. I can't remember if these
Keychrons are all hot swappable if you're buying a new one, I believe.
Okay, even low profile. That's another question that I'm pondering.
Don't buy low profile switches.
Why?
Because there's not the switch variety is minuscule compared to like the types and loudness and characteristics of the switches that are available is much lower in the low profile than in the full height.
Do low profile keys also imply low profile switches, or can you have have low profile keys with regular switches or no?
I mean, you could probably I'm sure someone has done this. Generally speaking, low profile means switches and keycaps together, not just switches or keycaps.
Okay. If I decide to go through with this, I will spend a lot of time in the keyboard channel on the Discord before I pull any triggers.
They will give you good advice.
Yes, they definitely they already have, and definitely will give more. We'll move on. The last thing I'll say, the thing that actually got me is I thought all mechanical keyboards typically were Bluetooth.
No,
I had no idea how many of them are doing like 2.4 gigahertz with their own dongles.
Yeah.
And the thing there is I'm really sick of having to get a wired keyboard out every time I go into the BIOS or into Clonezilla or anything that's not Windows.
Oh, because your Mac keyboard doesn't have Bluetooth support.
No, it is Bluetooth.
You're not. But it doesn't speak the Windows pairing, pre-OS pairing stuff.
Well, it pairs fine to Windows. The point is, like, it doesn't work in the BIOS or.
That's a limitation of the Mac keyboard. That's a Bluetooth feature that the Mac keyboards don't support because they do their own proprietary bullshit.
Oh, I see.
If you have a real Bluetooth keyboard, if you have a properly configured Bluetooth keyboard, you should be able to pair it with the Bluetooth dongle on your device in such a way that it pairs outside of the OS in the BIOS.
Like in the BIOS? Oh, I didn't know they did that.
That's one of the things you don't get if you use the Mac keyboard on Windows.
Yeah. Well, I've stuck with that thing because it's so quiet to type on while you have an open mic next to you, but I don't know. Thinking about it.
Like the explosion of switch configurations means you can get switches that are maybe not as quiet as a plastic dome keyboard, but damn near close.
Sure. Question from Cake Batter. As two people that live in commuting distance of the Salesforce tower, can you explain what Salesforce does?
Oh, yeah, this is easy.
I don't know that. I mean, I could give you a messy, vague, half-guessed answer, but go ahead.
Salesforce provides customer relationship management software. So if you are a salesperson, in the old days, you had this thing called ACT. And what ACT was a list of all of your sales contacts and all of the people that you worked with. And it gave you places to put information like what products they order and when their busy season is and what their kids' names are and how old they are and stuff like that. So that when you should call them next. So that then you would hit a button and you'd log into your computer in the morning and be like, okay, today you need to call these 8 people. And it lets you manage relationships with dozens, hundreds, thousands of customers in a way that was really difficult. My father, this was the thing that convinced my father that computers were not just stupid things to play Super Mario Brothers on in the early 90s. The problem with ACT was it ran on a local database. And at that time when that software was popular, shared databases were hard for a lot of reasons. So they had a bunch of products that let you maybe get that set up with 4 or 5 people and you could share a database amongst all the people that worked there. But for the most part, it was designed to run on one computer and for one person. So you couldn't get the benefit of having everybody having access to everybody else's data. Salesforce came along and absolutely ate their lunch about 15 years ago. And they built a CRM tool that is the kind of industry standard, and then built and or acquired a bunch of tools that live around that stuff. So they provide HR software and all sorts of other stuff. It's all web-based cloud software, and it makes a phenomenal amount of money. And I like to think that in every industry there's a LeBron James kind of caliber of person. So Salesforce tends to get all the LeBron Jameses of the sales world, having known a lot of people who work at Salesforce because they're my friend's parents, my kids' friends' parents. It's very sales guy. It's the most sales guys. So yeah. Half the reason
I took this question is because 3 rows behind me flying out here were a couple of Salesforce guys who were chatting up the flight. The flight attendants have little fold down seats that face backwards.
Yep.
Right in front of a bulkhead row.
Oh man, that's a trap seat. That's the worst.
And they end up having to talk to whatever passenger is there who might. Anyway, these Salesforce guys were really chatting up the flight attendant about how big the Salesforce tower is, which I think it is. Isn't it the tallest building in the country at the moment?
It's the tallest building in San Francisco for sure.
Oh,
I can't imagine it's bigger than Sears Tower.
Oh, you're probably not. Oh yeah, you're right. Well, they were. That was part of the chatting, was talking about how tall the tower is. Anyway,
look, It's vaguely phallic is all I'll say.
Yep.
They
make a lot of money.
They make a lot of money.
They own Slack, I believe.
No.
Do they not?
Didn't Microsoft buy Slack?
Oh, I don't think so. No, Microsoft has Teams for that.
Oh, that's right. Did they buy Slack? Oh, Salesforce did buy Slack. You're right.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
Yeah. So they buy a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
And what's his name? Although he's kind of a blowhard sales guy, seems to be generally a decent person. Benioff. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've stayed in his hospital before.
Oh. Is that really why it's called that?
Yeah.
Legitimately?
He gave them a shitload of money.
Wow. Enough to get a whole hospital named after you?
Well, I think they renamed the existing hospital after him. But
still, I mean, that's a lot. Yes, that's a lot.
I mean, Zuckerberg did the same. Like when Zuckerberg bought General Hospital, then he had to buy his own hospital. Maybe it was the other way around.
It's just the billionaire arms race of the Bay Area.
The Salesforce Tower is the second tallest building west of the Mississippi River.
That was exactly the factoid I heard them quote.
It's behind the Wilshire Grand Center in Los Angeles.
I believe in their telling it was the tallest west of the Mississippi.
Anyway. They're bad at math because the Wilshire Grand is 30 feet taller. Suck it, Benioff.
I've stayed there. All right. Next question. Actually, this is a twofer from, we're going to have to figure out how to say this username because they send a lot of good questions. Mangix? Mangix. M-A-N-G-I-X.
Manhix.
Is that a reference that I'm not getting?
I assume it's some sort of Linux compatible operating system.
Oh, I hope so. I need to go look that up. What's the right iPad to buy for basic web use and media consumption while traveling? My biggest concern is for longevity, considering my current one is from 2019 and only just starting to become too slow. So that's a multifaceted question.
Yeah, I think 5+ years is what I would expect from an iPad. I would expect as much as they cost now, I would expect like laptop longevity from them, which I think for me, 5 years is a laptop lifespan.
Yes. Although because you mentioned longevity, I feel like it makes it more complicated because what do we have? Good for traveling, only for basic uses like web browsing and email, needs to last a long time. I mean, so like for traveling and very basic usage, something like an iPad mini would be easy to recommend, but I don't know that an iPad mini is going to last especially long.
I mean, it's an A15 on the iPad mini, so it's basically going to last as long as your phone does, which is I would expect 5 years.
Yeah. I will say, although this is not a perfect example, but I have an iPad Pro from 2017, I want to say it is, and it's still going perfectly fine. Like the batteries, constantly, daily. Okay. I'm using it as a second monitor here as we record this podcast with this laptop. The battery's starting to show age for sure, but like it still feels quite snappy. Granted, I think that was before they moved the M chips in the Pros. I'm pretty sure it's still got an A chip in it.
Was it AX or something is what they did back then, I think.
I can't remember. It's the last iPad Pro with the home button. I will say this is absolutely a frill. You don't necessarily need this for what you're talking about, but the ProMotion screen on the iPad, I could not give it up at this point.
So that's the high refresh rate HDR, right? Yeah.
Well, this one doesn't have HDR, but the motion. Actually, I meant to say that about the person asking about monitor upgrades and saying they were fine with 60 hertz. Don't discount. I would not discount how much 120 hertz or higher is nice just on desktop and productivity stuff. Like I find the extra smoothness to be very nice just for plain old GUI stuff here. But anyway, this is tough to answer because you want portability and you don't need a lot of processing power, but you also want it to have longevity.
So okay. If you were using, so I use my iPad as a laptop replacement, basically, which is a little bit different market. I think that the low end, the iPad is not necessarily a great buy because the one that's $450, which seems like a very reasonable price, is only 64 gigs of storage, which is firmly not enough for an iPad that you're not just using connected to the internet all the time.
Apple really loves to skirt like insulting territory on their storage options. Like it's crazy.
Yeah, and it's to go to 256 gigs on that iPad. I think it's $150 or $200 bump. It's from $449 to $599, so $150 extra to get to 256 gigs.
Speaking of insulting,
to me, that is a hard no.
Yeah.
I think the mini, I was looking at, I was like, how big is the mini screen? How big is the old iPad? You know, like how big was the original 10-inch iPad screen? And the mini screen is about 8.5 inches now because they've gotten rid of the bezel almost entirely. The old iPad, the original like first wave with the buttons all the way through were 9.5 inches. So it's almost, but not quite the same size screen on the mini as it used to be. It's a Retina display. They don't do the high refresh rate. It doesn't do the it doesn't do HD. Sorry, it does. It is the high refresh rate. It is not the HDR. Because it's liquid retina, which I believe means it's the fast one.
No, it needs to have ProMotion to have the high refresh.
What the fuck does liquid retina mean then?
You got me, man.
Okay.
Your screen can turn into a killer police officer.
Oh man, that would be cool. I would take that if my iPad could morph. The benefit of it is it's small enough it fits in your back pocket, basically. Like if you wear jeans, you can jam it in there.
Yeah. I don't know if the iPad is the Air worth looking at because it does have an M1. The Pros are on an M2 now, but like I wonder if the Air starts at $599. They don't say what storage that is here.
So I think I think the Air starts at 128 is when I looked
actually
last.
it's 64 for $599 as well. That's 64, so that's also a hard no probably because you're at $749 to get 256. And Apple products are nice, and boy, does buying them suck.
Yeah, so it's hard because they last like I feel good about how long my Pro has lasted at this point. I see multiple more years in it for me.
Yeah.
The 256 gig mini is $650, so it's $100 more to get the Air. If you feel like the extra 2 inches of screen is worth it, then go for it. The battery will probably also last longer in the Air because it's bigger and can hold a bigger battery.
Yeah.
The one nice thing about both of these now is that they support the second gen Apple Pencil. So you get the no touch drawing and stuff like that if you want that, which is nice for $100 more or whatever it is they charge for the pencil.
Yeah. All right. The other question from this user, whose name I will no longer try to pronounce. Why doesn't Windows 11 have the game suspend feature from the Xbox? Are there any methods to get the same quick game resume? Even if I had to reconnect to a server, that's still bound to be faster than sitting through minutes of forced developer logos. My assumption is that it's done on the Xbox because that's a fixed platform with a very specific set of development libraries, SDK, et cetera, and so you can do things like that when you're controlling that much of the environment, and that the different
guaranteed
combination
fast
of
storage.
Yes. The sheer range of different drivers and runtimes and middleware and engines and you name it on the PC, it probably is just impossible to account for all the edge cases of things that wouldn't work right if they tried to implement that there. That's just my guess.
Well, and resuming state is harder because like your memory layouts and stuff may be different on your Windows machine based on what you have running. With the Xbox, it's basically only the OS and the application. So they know that this giant chunk of RAM is always going to be available if you're trying to load a game.
Yes.
The other, for what it's worth, that feature is an incredible pain in the ass to get working.
Really?
It is challenging.
Oh, I didn't even think about it. You guys would have worked on that because
we didn't, because it's a multiplayer game, so we were exempt.
Is that part of the TCR? I didn't realize that.
Well, because if you have to connect to a server and you're playing multiplayer, then it just the requirement is to dump you back to the login prompt, not to the game. The other answer is that on Windows 11, all decent, like on the consoles, you're required to show those logos. On Windows, there's no cert requirement for that, so there's no reason for you to do that. You should let people key through those, and then it's not a problem.
Yeah, they should.
Only bad developers make you watch those logos, or sometimes they're hiding stuff. Like a lot of games generate shaders and on every runtime, and it'll hide it in that time.
Yeah, it's one of the quiet great things about the PS5. I hope consoles aren't actually dying like people think they are, but one of my favorite things about game consoles every time a new generation comes out is seeing all the little features that often don't even have a name and barely get promoted, but that somebody on the console team thought of to make your experience like 2% better with that console. One of those on the PS5, it doesn't always work right, or it seems to reset every so often, but the PS5 will remember if you have watched all those logos.
Oh, thank God.
Intro stuff. and then for at least some number of days or even maybe weeks, you won't see them again. That especially goes for like first party stuff. Like there's a ton of stuff that the first time you boot it up on a PS5, you'll see 5 different logos, and then from thereafter, like basically none.
Yeah, like the whole thing is the sooner you get people in the game, the more likely they are to play your game, right?
Yeah.
Anytime Nintendo is the biggest criminal on this space, as far as I'm concerned, because man, they will. It takes 6 minutes to get from the launch screen, from hitting the button on the desktop into an actual Animal Crossing island, I think.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. This question is from roughly the October timeframe, so the username is Spooky Actual, which may no longer be in effect.
Okay,
but you know who you are.
Yeah, we know who they are.
I was going to do a PC upgrade as the 2020 lockdown started, and those plans got derailed. Now I'm still on a 2014 era Core i5, and I'm starting to figure out what my next PC is going to be. And the recent episode about Intel's new stuff has me wondering if I should wait a bit longer. This is from end of September last year. Anyway,
it's only gotten worse.
Yeah. Do I get the latest stuff? Do I get the best of the last generation? Is waiting for the second generation of the new architecture the right move? I feel like this may not be super timely for this person in particular here, but this is a good time to just talk about how our philosophies have evolved about like when to upgrade and to what, especially with the travails we have both experienced in the last couple of years. Okay, do I get the latest stuff? Do I get the best of the last generation? Is waiting for the second generation of the new architecture the right move? I will never early adopt PC stuff again, personally.
So I think the mistake is to buy the high end stuff, honestly.
Really? Well, I think for normal users, yes, absolutely.
I think honestly, even for me, like I've switched to while I'm waiting for the 13900K to come back from warranty again, I'm using a 14700, and it is indistinguishable in everything except for like 2 things I do from the 14900K. It runs cooler, it's more stable. Like there's no reason to buy one of those 900 parts.
Oh yeah. You see that in sales trends, and the benchmarks, like the bars are bigger, but not by much. Right. Like on the Intel side, it's the i5s and i7s are the bulk of the sales to gamers and people who want some performance, but don't need an i9, and on AMD, it's like the 5800, 7800s. It's always the sweet spot of like high end, but not all the way high end that people get. But as far as like when to buy in, I definitely will not buy into the first generation of a socket and a chipset again, nor the first generation of a major new chip redesign. Like for example, Intel's kind of tile stuff is starting. Meteor Lake, Meteor Lake it's only in laptops. I think Arrow Lake this should be later this year. Theoretically, yeah. Desktop part with tiles, which are like their equivalent of chiplets from the AMD world. Like I would not, no offense to Intel, I would not touch their first tile part on the desktop with a 10-foot pole. Yeah, but I mean, the unfortunate thing about at least the Intel stuff, the problems that I had is like, I don't think Intel did a whole lot wrong. It's mostly on the motherboard vendors. On the same thing on the AMD side too. Like they're just dumping too much power in these so that their motherboards are 3% faster, or 0.3% faster in benchmarks than everybody else's. Yeah. Well, and the emulating AMD CPU stuff turned out to seem like it was partially AMD's fault, partially the board vendor's fault, for example. But that was a new generation chip, for example. Like so that's just a kink that had not gotten worked out. I mean, did they make it right with people who were affected? Well, I mean, it was a very small number of people whose CPUs actually burned. Yeah. I mean, the gray area was how many people's CPUs were being subjected to way too high voltage, but didn't die, but were being degraded slowly. Well, that's always a problem. Yeah. Last less time, but they did issue emergency BIOS updates immediately to correct the high voltage stuff. I'm trying to think like a general rule here. Like, if it's a new socket, I would wait for at least the second gen of chips and boards. But often on Intel's side, there's no second gen for sockets. Right? I'm wondering, like so that changed in the last couple, and I wonder if now AMD is forcing their hand where that's just you think they're going back to one chip, one socket? That's just because they had released the same architecture 3 times in a row. I think so. Yeah. I thought the one before 1700 also was multi-chip per. I would not assume you're going to see multiple years of the same sockets and the same chips from Intel. Yeah. Well, Intel had less problems per socket per chipset than AMD, I would say. At any rate, I would I would say like just wait for stuff to mature in general. And I actually think I'm even going to in the future, even if it's on a kind of more mature generation of something, I'm not even going to buy it like the month it comes out. I feel like I'm going to wait at least halfway through that cycle, which typically is like a year in the CPU motherboard world. Like I'd probably wait till the second half of that thing's lifespan to buy in, just to make sure that like early samples that are not great are out of the channel,
well, and just to see what the problems are, right?
Yes.
Like that's the big thing. I like, if I were buying something right now, I think I'd do a 14700K and be pretty, it's a like $350 CPU or something. It's not super expensive. And it seems incredibly performant for what you're spending.
I mean, I think like a 7800X3D is also pretty great if you do want to go AMD and you're just doing games like that, because that's just single die. You're not getting into the weird split cache stuff of the bigger chips.
Yeah.
And if you get a good proven board without issues, you're probably fine there as well. But yeah, I'm excited to see what CPUs do in the next 5 years, let's say.
Yeah. My hope is that the next time that we're in an upgrading kind of mind frame, things will be a little more clear. Yes. This is, for what it's worth, this is the most kind of up in the air the CPU world has been in my, like, since the end of the Pentium 4, basically. Like it's a little buck wild out there right now.
Right. Like since we went to multi-core, right?
Yeah. Basically. Since Nehalem, since the high end, like the end of the Pentium 4, where they were approaching 4 gigahertz and like the CPUs were on fire basically because they were generating so much heat, pumping so much power through them. And it was unclear, like you were spending a lot of energy to get a good performance, but the AMD side was better, but there was some optimization problems with compilers because they were early on multi-core. And like, it was just, it's generally, there's a pretty clear, hey, this is the right choice. And right now there isn't one, which is the weird thing.
Yeah.
Like you have to look at how much power is being used and what you use your computer for. And you have to think about it a little bit more than you have in the past.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of weird paradigm shift stuff going on, like big and little cores on the same package, this kind of like componentized or modular design with the chiplets all on the same pack. You know what I mean? Like there's just a lot of weird new stuff philosophically happening on the CPU lately, neural processing units, all kinds of weird stuff.
Yeah. It's a lot of weird stuff.
Gonna take some time to iron out. So yeah, I would get something proven if you're still upgrading now. Let's see. Let's do a couple more real quick cake batters and then get out of here.
Can we do this tasty sandwich one?
Sure.
Okay.
Let me find it. That's a tasty sandwich. Oh, yes. I'm sorry. I did want to do this one. With rumors of a stripped down version of Windows for portable gaming PCs in the works, how likely are we to see an Xbox branded handheld sometime in the future, either from Microsoft themselves or from an official partner? This is from the end of February, before the GDC comments that Phil Spencer made that stopped short of saying, hey, we are making a handheld, but did imply they're, he was like, our hardware group
gave a lot of winks. Yeah.
Yeah. Our hardware group is always looking at what products we might be able to bring to market in the future. But he also did the whole, like, I would like to see the Lenovo and the ASUS handhelds be Xboxes. Like he also did the, hey, we would like to get our middleware, our Xbox ecosystem onto other handhelds. So it doesn't guarantee they're going to make an Xbox branded handheld, but it certainly seems more likely now than it did.
I will tell you, those handhelds would be infinitely better if there was an Xbox button on them that could be used for Xbox button things on Windows. We can talk about it.
Oh, yeah. Oh.
Like the Steam and Windows and the Xbox app on Windows both use the Xbox button for things that would be incredibly useful on a handheld device that runs Windows.
Oh, I see what you mean. Okay.
Yeah, and most of those buttons don't. Most of those things don't have that, or you have to bind it specifically, and like the out of the box is real bad on them.
Sure. Maybe this is more a question at this point about what a gaming focused portable Windows should be than actually.
So Adam over at PC World and I talked about this on a video a few weeks ago. Jeff Grubb has of giantbomb.com. You may be familiar with that site, Brad.
Heard of it.
Has gone on the record as saying that the Steam Deck is the only handheld for him because it's easy to use and it like doesn't require a lot of futzing with in the way that the Windows ones all do, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And we were specifically talking about that. I had spent a lot of time with the Steam Deck, but not a lot with the Windows machines. and I took a different Windows machine home for 3 or 4 weeks. So I got some time with the kind of breadth of the Windows side of that platform, which is the Asus Ally, the Lenovo. I can't remember what theirs is called, but it's a giant chunky boy. I use the MSI one that uses the Intel GPU a little bit, and some of the INEOs and the stuff out of China a little bit.
Sure.
And
Lenovo Legion Go.
Legion Go. Thank you. Like the big thing. So Microsoft is going to, if they're going to do this, it's going to be something that's like, hey, you can play your PC games here. And it's like their contribution to it is we need a decent front end for this that doesn't require you to use the Windows desktop on these little screens with a touchpad, with a touch screen. And they need to not charge the vendors for the OS, right? Because they're competing with Valve, who's not charging for the OS, and they're running stripped down hardware. And like a lot of the vendors that are in that space right now are doing speeds and feeds marketing. So like the Ally is a faster GPU and faster this and bigger resolution screen and blah, 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 blah. But those things, those numbers being bigger makes the battery life worse, which is the number that most people probably care about more than anything else. So like having a 1080p screen on one of those devices is kind of a net negative because you can't really see much difference. And it destroys the battery life compared to the comparable Steam Deck. So yeah, like I'd love to see Microsoft come in and dictate, hey, here's what the battery life needs to be. Here's how heavy it needs to be. Here's what resolution screen we're going to put on it. It has to have HDR, this kind of stuff. And then either build them themselves or put out that spec and in exchange for following their hardware spec, you know, subsidize the Windows install for the vendors.
Okay. Good answer.
Cloud. Also, it's going to have a lot of cloud stuff. Mm-hmm. It would be dope to be able to play all my old Xbox 360 digital games on a Windows handheld. That'd be cool.
And if it managed all your save games from other platforms for them and stuff.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
Microsoft should get on that.
It's also a tiny market for Microsoft, though, is the other thing. Like it's like, yes, the Steam Deck is a huge success, selling millions of units, but in the Microsoft world, selling millions of units is a failure, right?
Well, sure, but they've still got a little bit of the old embrace, extend, extinguish in them, right? I
think so. Yeah,
they see an emerging market and they've got to enter it.
I mean, that is the Microsoft MO, is to destroy this new market before it becomes a problem for them.
Yeah. All right. Cake batter lightning round before we wrap up here.
Yeah, hit me.
How do you feel about restaurants serving food on a wood board instead of a plate? That sounds like a sanitation nightmare to me.
Yeah, they wax the boards. It's fine.
Wax them?
Yeah, right. You put like a edible wax on it, like it's no problem.
I mean, I guess it's mainly raw meat. I've always heard you shouldn't put on wooden cutting boards.
I've used a wooden cutting board exclusively for the last like 15 years. It's fine.
Okay.
Live on the edge, man.
How do you clean it?
Huh?
How do you clean it?
Lemon juice and salt, or soap and water, depending.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I oil them as well, so that it gives the bacteria something nice to eat.
I don't think I've ever been to a restaurant that serves food on a wooden board.
It's usually something like cheese or charcuterie or stuff like that.
Charcuterie. That's fine. That's totally fine.
Yeah. Look, it's been so long since I ate something at a restaurant that didn't come in a styrofoam or like compostable box that it's hard for me to say.
Sure. Now I'm hungry.
Anything beyond a wood board is a no-go for me, though.
Sure.
Like if it comes out in a shoe, I'm going to be like, no, I don't want to eat that.
Did you see this video that kind of blew up on Twitter of this noodle restaurant in Japan where everybody sits? There's like a zigzagging trough of water in the restaurant. And they just send big clumps of noodles down this like rushing water through the trough, and people like snatch them with their chopsticks, snatch the wads of noodles.
Wow.
As they fly by out of the water.
Is it like a dipping ramen place or something?
Yes. And I think you would grab the noodles and like dip them into whatever you had there.
Wow.
I believe it was closed down for some kind of mass sickness issue.
Yeah, I can see how that would like be a potential problem.
Yeah. But I thought that was a pretty fun, novel way to serve food.
No, that sounds bad. Okay. It's going to be a no for me, I think.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Last question. Do I buy a clapper switch and put it on the lamps?
Sure.
Yes, absolutely.
Clap on, clap off the clapper.
Yeah. Like this actually made me wonder with like the proliferation of home automation stuff. I'm surprised there hasn't been more of a nostalgic play for the clapper to like somebody coming out with a Wi-Fi enabled clapper, or maybe that does exist. Actually, I don't know.
Did you ever have a clapper?
No.
My grandmother had one. It didn't work. That was the problem with the clapper.
Oh, wow. I figured it seemed simple enough technology that it would be fairly reliable. That's interesting to hear.
You had to clap really loud.
Huh.
So it turns out it was better to just walk over and press the button on the light.
Sure.
What I want a return of is touch lamps. Did you ever have touch lamps when you were a kid?
No.
Oh man, touch lamps were really cool. The outside was a little electrified. You'd touch it and it would just turn off or dim if you tapped it or held it. And I'm sure it was probably an electrocution hazard, but really, really neat 70s business.
That sounds fun. You know, this occurred to me and I've pulled up the clapper Amazon listing, and sure enough, this is exactly the direction they've gone. I propose there could be like full on like Wi-Fi enabled clappers that might integrate with Home Assistant, or they could take the tack of being like, you don't need all that shit. We did it first.
It has to be. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Sure enough, the way they're billing it, the way they're billing the clapper on Amazon is the clapper, the original home automation.
But look, they're not wrong.
I guess not.
I will say something changed on my Home Assistant install fairly recently, and it's so much faster. It's so much faster on the voice command stuff with Siri that like it happens immediately after I hit the command, and I'm it's better than I'm going to say it's better than the clapper.
Oh, okay.
And I can whisper to my wife. I can be like, "Hey Siri, turn off the bedroom light," and it'll turn off all the lights in the bedroom. And like, I feel like I'm Dick Tracy talking to my watch or something.
Sure.
Old man reference there, by the way.
Mm-hmm. I'm surprised the voice activation stuff, does that run through Home Assistant? Is that not directly just contacting your phone OS at that point?
So if you are, if you use the HomeKit integration on Home Assistant, then it talks directly inside the LAN to the device. It doesn't go out to the cloud and back is the difference.
Right. But the phone would be taking your voice input, but it would still have to be sending the commands through Home Assistant and through that integration. Right. That makes sense.
Or the watch, but it's fast. Well, I mean, the phone thinks it's talking to Apple Home, right? But the Apple Home integration is to Home Assistant, and it's a fast local connection.
Yep. All right. That's it for questions.
So that's it. That's it for us this week. Thank you all for bearing with us. As always, Brad and Will Made a Tech Pod is 100% listener supported. We are here thanks to the kindness and generosity of you.
It's true.
If you would like to find out how to support the show, you can go to patreon.com/techpod. Again, it's patreon.com/techpod. And for $5 a month, you get access to the fabulous Discord where there's people talking about keyboards and audio gear and I assume Mangix. I don't know. All sorts of stuff all the time. Mm-hmm. You can learn a lot and meet cool people who like a lot of the same things that you do. It's $5 a month. It's at patreon.com/discord/techpod. It's at patreon.com/techpod. And as always, we want to do a very special thank you to our executive producer tier patrons, including Andrew Slosky. Buddy Crimes is tired of being audited. Maybe too many buddy crimes then. Paddle Creek Games, makers of Fractured Veil, David Allen, James Kamek, Joel Krauska, Jordan Lippett, Just Wedge, Pantheon, makers of the HS3 high-speed 3D printer, and Twinkle Twinkie. Thank you all so much. We really appreciate y'all.
Yes, we do. Thank you.
And I think that'll do it for us this week. Brad, we will see you next week. Are we still thinking Pirates of Silicon Valley in 2 weeks from now, maybe? Or you think... Yeah,
maybe 3. We'll see.
Let's call it tentative based on real life. And
yes, I'll just continue linking the archive.org page with the movie in the show notes until we do that movie to give people plenty of reminders to go watch it.
I think it's more of a miniseries. Isn't it like 4 hours or something? It's pretty long.
No, it's just one movie.
Okay.
It's about an hour and a half.
I think I watched it. I'm going to out myself here, but I watched it first because somebody gave me a video CD of it when I was working at the magazine still. So
I would stand to reason. I checked before I went around saying, hey, watch this on archive.org. I checked, and sure enough, it got very limited home releases. Like
it's not anywhere. Yeah. It's like there wasn't a DVD even as far as I know.
You can't, like, it's listed on places like Amazon, but you can't actually buy or stream it. It got a DVD release, but that was limited. It never got a Blu-ray. It was a made for TNT movie.
Yeah, I think the thing that I saw was ripped off of a TV tuner. Probably would look like ripped off a TiVo or something.
Yeah, I taped it off of TNT when it aired.
Here you go. So that'll do it for us this week. We will be back next week with another episode. Thanks for listening, everybody, and have a lovely week. Bye.